Hey there, Braves fans. Welcome to another edition of State of the Braves. I'm your host, George McNair. Awesome to be back with you guys as we are exiting the All-Star break and getting back into the regular season. This is actually one of my least favorite days of the baseball season, just because there are no games going on. Very boring. If you turn on ESPN or MLB TV, they don't know what to do with themselves because there's absolutely nothing happening today. But nonetheless, it will get exciting really quickly as we are very close to crunch time. Of course, during this time, you really start looking at the trade wire, all those rumors flying around about who might trade for who. Juan Soto, of course, being maybe the biggest trade piece in a long time. I don't know for certain that he's going to move over the next couple weeks. It would make some more sense for the Nationals probably to move him during the off season, probably get a lot more suitors for him then because everybody's finances are in order. Braves fans don't expect the Braves to be going after Juan Soto simply because they don't have a ton of money or a ton of prospects actually to go after him. But nonetheless, that's going to be a really exciting time. It was a hugely important time for the Braves last season as Alex Anthopoulos pulled all the right strings, getting all those outfielders in, and we'll see what happens this year. But that's probably going to be our next episode. Today we are going to really focus in on reviewing the MLB draft and also the events of the All-Star weekend. So let's actually start with that. The Braves had 6 All-Stars representing Atlanta, and of course also had the coaching staff there, and that was really cool. I saw MLB sat down with Brian Snitker at one point, did a pretty long interview with him. That was a really good one. You can find online if you want. And also they sat down with Ron Washington, one of my favorite Braves coaches, and he just shared a lot of different insights and wisdom, and you really get a feel for how the Braves value their coaching staff, these guys who've been around a long time, and kind of go about things in an old school way. I wouldn't say the Braves as a team are necessarily super old school, but I do think that some of those values, the hard work, the showing up to work every day, the value of practice, all those things kind of show forth through some of their coaches. And of course, I think that has a lot to do with their success on the field as well. So it's kind of cool to see some of that, and I'm sure those coaches had a lot of fun in LA as well. But things kind of jumped or got off to a start with Ronald Acuna participating in the home run derby. Unfortunately for him, he was out in the first round against Pete Alonso. It would have been great to see him take down Alonso. I don't know about you guys. Now, maybe this is my bias against the Mets. I'm kind of at this point annoyed by Alonso and just how seriously, kind of weirdly seriously, he takes the home run derby. I don't know if you guys watched it, but particularly in the next round as he was going against Julio Rodriguez, he was kind of in the dugout or maybe even below, just sitting there, breathing. It's almost like he was praying or thinking about his swing, and it just came across as kind of creepy. But that was Pete Alonso for you. So he was taking it incredibly seriously. I don't know why he was also lifting right before the event. I don't know if you've ever lifted. I don't know that would help you. I think it might hurt you as you get worn down right before. But nonetheless, he was super into it. He did beat Acuna to his credit. I actually didn't get to watch this live. Had some other things I had to do that evening, but it did look like Acuna didn't get the best pitches to hit, maybe to really get into a groove. Alonso had his guy that had done really well for him over the last several years. But nonetheless, Acuna, still it's just kind of cool to be able to have a Brave participate in the home run derby. I've never seen a Brave actually do all that well in it for whatever reason, but pretty cool for him to be in it. As far as the game goes, it started out really well for the National League. In fact, Acuna started the National League first, bottom of the first inning off with a double, just smoked it down the line, scored on a Mookie Betts single, and not a lot happened after Paul Goldschmidt then hit a home run in that inning, and then pretty much nothing happened for the National League after the first inning. Austin Riley did pick up a single as well. in the 8th inning. So the Braves did have 2 of the National League's 5 hits. But just really cool to see so many Braves participate. Max Fried didn't pitch in this game since he had pitched just a couple days before. He just took the day off, but was there. He did an interview with the guys in the booth during the game, which was kind of nice. I will just say this: I hate how they were miking the pitchers, particularly the pitchers and the catchers during the game. I thought it was really annoying. You know, they're trying to interview the pitcher while he's trying to focus on the game and what pitch he's going to throw, and I just didn't think it worked. Now they mic'd hitters in the past before. They mic'd fielders. They did that in this game as well. I like that. It takes a little less focus, especially when you're in the field, maybe as an outfielder, to do some interviews like that. But to mic the pitcher, I think it just took away from the game. You know, there were Braves and other guys too coming into the game for the first time, and you know, as a fan, you want the national broadcasters to talk about your guy and why he's an all-star and what he's done that season to be in the game. And they lost all that because they mic'd the pitcher for, you know, that inning or whatever. So anyways, I'm not a big fan of that. It's maybe a small thing, but I was definitely annoyed by it. And also just the awkwardness of, as much as I love John Smoltz, maybe I don't love him as much as a broadcaster, and the other guy in the booth, just kind of awkward back and forth with the pitcher in the moment. I could do without that. So I don't know if they'll continue to do it. They probably will, but definitely not my favorite thing. Anyways, the American League did win that game 3-2, and here we are just a couple days later, waiting for real baseball to start back up. Again, really cool for the Braves to get 6 representatives in that game, particularly Austin Riley, who really had to wait until the last minute to hear his name called, but very deservingly so, and hope that he and some of these other guys come back again and make it back as all-stars once again. All right, well, kind of the meat of this episode, what I really want to focus in on is the Braves draft, what they did in these 3 days of the MLB draft. And, you know, what they were expected to do, what a lot of the pundits and supposed experts were saying, is that the Braves were probably going to take a college arm with the 20th pick, kind of what they've done in the past several drafts. And, you know, I think the supposed, you know, understanding of the Braves system and how they like to do things is take a college pitcher that, you know, has a high floor, right? You're probably not going to totally swing and miss on a college pitcher who is projectable. They cost a little less money, you know, to pick up in the first round. You can spread out your draft pool money a lot better after that, and you get a lot of guys. And that's what they've done in the last few drafts. And so it made sense that they might do that again. Of course, what threw a wrench into that was the Braves picking up the number 35 pick through a trade, getting about $2.2 million more, and you know what they were going to do with that. So the Braves really did what they were not expected to do, and instead of drafting a college arm, not only do they draft a high school arm with their first pick, but they their first 3 picks were high school pitchers. High school pitchers have a lot more volatility. You know, you're taking a chance because they're so far away from actually making it to the major leagues. Is this guy going to be able to continue to get better and better to make it to the majors? But the Braves do that. They take 3 high school pitchers, and I'm going to talk about each of those guys a little bit and those specifics in just a second. But just very interesting under Alex Anthopoulos. This is really the first draft that you can say the Braves are really kind of swinging for the fences, to use a baseball metaphor, in the draft, going after some guys who, yeah, they might swing and miss. You know, there is more risk in taking maybe some of these guys. There's more time that you have to wait for them potentially to get to the majors. But also, man, if these guys are as good as maybe the Braves think they could be, these guys could be really exciting in a few years. The other thing, you know, just to talk about before we really get into the draft, is how difficult it is in baseball to project guys. Baseball is probably the hardest sport to project what you see, before the major leagues, and will a guy actually be able to make it? And that's why the draft historically has been so many rounds. It used to be 50 some rounds, and you'd go through, and I encourage you to do this. If you just look at any draft, and I just pulled up the 1984 draft just as a random. That's the draft that Greg Maddux and Tom Glavine were selected. Neither of them first rounders, by the way. They were both second rounders. But if you look at that, far more guys, even in the first few rounds, don't make the majors than do make the majors. And of course, you look at that compared to the NFL or NBA draft, is just totally the opposite. So anyways, baseball takes so many specific skills that you have to do really well. It's just very hard to predict those things, which means you have to have great scouting and you have to have really good development. And I do think the Braves have really good scouting and, generally speaking, a good development system. Of course, you're always going to have guys that don't make it. Of course, we just went through the whole thing of Drew Waters being a top prospect in the Braves organization, really not figuring it out with the Braves, and then them trading him away for that number 35 pick in the draft. And so, yeah, there's no can't miss prospect in baseball. Maybe there are a few, but not many. They don't come along very often. So we're going to have to see how each of these picks for the Braves, how they progress over the next few years. So let's get into the draft. I want to look first at day one of the draft. These are rounds 1 and 2. The Braves actually had 4 picks in day one, which is pretty great for them. So their first pick in the draft, this is the number 20 pick in the first round, was Owen Murphy. He was a pitcher out of the state of Illinois. He was actually the Player of the Year, Gatorade Player of the Year for the state of Illinois. So definitely a really, really talented player, and actually a big star on both sides of the diamond, both as a pitcher and a hitter. I think he had 18 home runs as a hitter. The Braves have come out saying that they plan for him to be a pitcher only. It's interesting that there have been some reports that Owen Murphy wants to try to play both ways. I hope that doesn't go into his signability if he's like really set on that. But we'll have to see where that goes. I heard reports that he could have been a 4th or 5th rounder if he was just being drafted as a hitter, position player. So obviously very talented in that regard too, but more talented, maybe more projectable as a pitcher. One thing, I think I mentioned this in the last podcast, the Braves love athletic pitchers. You can go all the way back to John Smoltz, who was like a 3 or 4 sports star in high school, because they can figure things out with their body better. There are things that they can do to adjust their game over time, and Owen Murphy definitely fits that mold. He's known to be advanced, very advanced for a high school pitcher. A guy that maybe, even though he's young, could move a little quicker through the minors. Not that that's the number one reason why you draft a guy like this, but that would definitely be a positive if he could get to the majors, kind of like a Michael Harris at 21 as opposed to 23, 24, 25. And one of the reasons for that is he has very good command, and he has 4 pitches that are all pretty solid. His fastball is mid-90s. Everything else is also pretty good too, with a slider, with a changeup, and with a curveball. So Owen Murphy, definitely somebody to be excited about. I would say in terms of picking him, he wasn't the star of the draft. He was actually projected by some to be more of like in the 30 or 40 range in terms of where he was going to be drafted. Of course, with baseball, you never quite know. It's really hard to judge that. So just because he was, thought about in that range doesn't mean the Braves were reaching for him. They just liked him more than some of the guys that were projected ahead of him. But I do think he also is a guy that, they're taking the guy that they like, but they're also not taking a guy who is going to be like insanely expensive and going to kind of derail the rest of your draft because you're spending so much money on your first pick. That maybe could have happened. Maybe the Braves could have gone a different way with another pick. They chose not to do that. He probably still had to pay him over slot, but maybe not as much as some others. Their second pick, which was that number 35 pick they got for the Drew Waters trade, was J.R. Ritchie. This is a kid out of the state of Washington, high school pitcher, also a right-hander. Don't know if I mentioned that about Owen Murphy, but also J.R. Ritchie is a right-hander, also throws in the mid-90s. Very simple, repetitive delivery, which is something scouts really like. He's probably not going to get lost with his delivery and get really out of whack. He has a 3 to 4 pitch mix as well, so really encouraging with that, and a hard worker. He was actually at the draft, so as I was watching it, you got to see a little short interview with him. Of course, you can't tell a lot in one interview, but there are some things you can tell. He is well spoken. He said that he was going to be the hardest worker in the draft. He came across really nicely. His family was there, super excited for him. He's from a very small little island off the coast of Washington State, that's never really produced any major leaguers. So, I think he's going to be very motivated. I think he probably comes from a smaller area, which could be a good thing for the Braves to get kind of a small town guy who's really motivated. So it'll be interesting to see. I really like J.R. Ritchie just from what I've seen of him, some of the video, and just how he came across in that interview. So looking forward to seeing him in a Braves uniform. Their second round pick was Cole Phillips. He's a Texas high school pitcher, also a right-hander. The Braves only took right-handed pitchers, by the way. Any pitcher I mentioned was a right-hander. Cole Phillips is also, I think, someone to be pretty excited about. He could have been a first rounder if he had been healthy. Unfortunately, he had Tommy John, but before he was forced to have Tommy John back in April, he was throwing around 100 miles an hour. So very live arm, and probably has a plus slider as well. So this guy is one that, to me, kind of fits into that Spencer Strider mold, just an incredible arm talent. A guy, if he kind of puts it all together, could be something special and could be viewed as kind of a steal in the second round. The Braves also had a round 2 compensation pick, and so this was their last pick of day 1. His name is Blake Burkhalter. He's from the University of Auburn, and maybe the least sexy of these picks, but someone that could probably move pretty quickly through the Braves organization. You could see him earlier than any of these other three guys, because he is projected probably to be a reliever. He had a really good year at Auburn. He didn't pitch a ton of innings, but he had a 10 strikeout to 1 walk ratio. That's pretty crazy. And like I said, he was a reliever at Auburn. The Braves had mentioned that they want to try him as a starter, which would be pretty interesting, considering he's only been a reliever in college. He kind of throws a cutter fastball along with a changeup. So maybe they're thinking that can convert pretty well to a starter. I think some of this is, when you have a guy with some arm talent, you want to try him as a starter first, just because there's so much more value to that. And of course, they could always go back to him being a reliever because they know he can do it. So nonetheless, being a college guy, especially if he kind of sinks into being a reliever, I could see him coming to Atlanta pretty quickly. So that was day 1. I'll just mention day 2 and especially day 3. I'm not going to go into each of these guys in depth. Quite honestly, I don't know much in depth about some of these guys, but I'm giving you some information that's, that I found through my research and listening to some of the top guys in MLB talking about what the Braves have done over the draft. So I just want to at least give you a bird's eye view of some of these guys, and some of the guys I'm more excited about. So some guys I will skip. It doesn't mean that they're not going to be good. It's just there may be a little less that jumps out to me personally. Okay, so in day 2, the Braves started the third round by picking Drake Baldwin. He's a catcher out of Missouri State, and probably a hit-first catcher. This guy has a really good bat. hard contact to all fields. Some of the video you can find of him, he's hitting a home run out to right field, then he's hitting a home run out the other way to left. He doesn't chase a lot of bad balls, puts the barrel on the ball, so definitely a good hitting catcher. Another thing that I really like of him, and I think the Braves probably really liked of him, is he was a big hockey star in high school in Wisconsin. Kind of takes me back to Tom Glavine and his hockey stardom. But, you know, the Braves, like I said, they like guys who can cross over into other sports, who show some kind of athleticism and ability in other ways, and he's definitely a guy that does that. The question is, can he stick at catcher? Defensively, there's some question marks. Obviously, the Braves are going to get him in and really probably coach him up big time and the art of catching. So if he can, you know, catchers, it's really hard to find good catchers, especially guys who can hit at that position. There's tons of guys, and we saw this last year when the Braves were just searching for catchers. There are tons of guys who can go out there defensively and catch. It's another thing to find a catcher who can do it well and hit well. So maybe Drake Baldwin can turn into that guy for the Braves. Obviously, the Braves feel pretty good long-term with William Contreras in the fold, but nonetheless, it'd be great to have another guy in the system. And, you know, by the way, the Braves took 2 catchers in this draft. They are clearly pretty depleted at the catching position. So the fact that they addressed that with 2 guys, Baldwin being probably the better of the 2, it's very encouraging, and you can understand why they would do that. All right, so their fourth round selection was David McCabe out of UNC Charlotte. This guy is not sure where he's going to play. Defensively might have some question marks, maybe third base if he can stick there. I think he was announced as a third baseman, maybe first base, maybe ultimately DH if, you know, defensively he has struggles. But nonetheless, he was drafted primarily for his bat. Huge power guy. I really like this because the Braves have not drafted a ton of pure power guys in the last few drafts. I'm glad that they did this. He's also a switch hitter. He hit 16 home runs in just 42 games in college last year at UNC Charlotte. So there's no doubt that this guy has real, legitimate, raw power, and we'll just have to see how he translates into the minor league system. But definitely a guy I'm going to be keeping my eye on, because if he can maintain some level of defense at any position, I could see him finding his way to the big leagues, maybe not too far from now. Okay, the next guy is this is our round 5 pick, Ignacio Alvarez, third baseman. Don't have a ton on him. This is a guy that jumped into the earlier rounds, the day 2 rounds, kind of late. He had a really good showing, I think fall ball showing that put him on the map a little bit more, but he has great defensive ability at third base. And so we'll just have to keep an eye on him. Like I said, don't have as much on him, but, you know, a third baseman. Braves are also kind of, you know, kind of weak in that area, only having 1 third baseman in their top 30 prospects. So we'll see what Alvarez is able to do. Be interesting to get some eyes on him soon. The Braves' 6th round pick is Seth Keller. He was a pitcher, high school pitcher from the state of Virginia. This is an interesting one because Keller, if you just look at his ability, his pitch mix, all those numbers, he compares very well to some of the earlier picks that the Braves made in day 1. So why is he taken this late? He's only 5'10", which is pretty short for a pitcher. There have certainly been shorter pitchers to be successful in the major leagues, but they also come with maybe a little more risk, a little more failure rate when you are under 6 foot. So we'll have to see how he does, but I think it's an interesting pick and one that could really work in the Braves' favor if he's successful. He also was a two-way player in high school, so, you know, pretty athletic, and like I said, the Braves really like that. Their 7th round pick was Adam Mayer. This is another guy who the Braves are drafting off of injury, but so he would not have been available this late otherwise. He's out of Oregon, the University of Oregon. He had a really weird, kind of broken up college career. Of course, like a lot of guys, he lost the 2020 season or most of it because of COVID. Then he got hurt off and on. He had a UCL sprain, which is kind of related to Tommy John, but it didn't require Tommy John surgery. So there's obviously injury risk by taking this guy, but he has a tremendous breaking ball. Some say it might have even been the best breaking ball in the draft. So true talent with this guy. There's maybe some signability questions. I'm guessing the Braves would have to go over slot to sign this guy, and we'll have to see. Hopefully he could come back from injury. Hopefully he signs, and just another guy with a lot of high upside that the Braves took here. All right, I'm going to skip ahead to round 10. Round 10, the Braves took Andrew Keck. He is a catcher from Southeast Missouri State. So apparently not only do the Braves want to draft catchers, but they're only taking catchers from Missouri in this draft. But Keck is somewhat interesting. Also potentially a bat first catcher. He actually profiles pretty interestingly because he had a lot of steals. So a lot of speed at the catching position, and he showed a lot of power this season, which he hadn't really done a lot before this season. So interesting speed power combo from a catcher. Definitely needs to work defensively to get better. So he's kind of similar in that way to Baldwin. But the Braves fill a positional need, like I mentioned, 2 catchers within the first 10 rounds of the draft. So it's good to fill that void. All right, well, let's move on to day 3. Like I said, I'm not going to go into every pick of day 3. The further you go, the harder it is to find information on these guys. The Braves definitely took more position players in day 3 than they had in the earlier rounds. The other thing that's pretty obvious that the Braves aren't really going for any big name guys in these rounds, which means they probably went over slot with a lot of their high school players that they chose in especially day 1. That's not to say that some of these guys couldn't show up and really be players for the Braves long term. All right, so round 12, Justin Janis. He's a first baseman out of the University of Illinois. He has a great hit tool, which I really like. To me, a lot of times a player can show up and, they look like a 5-tool player. They're incredibly athletic. They look good in a uniform, but they can't hit. They have great power. When they're able to put the bat on the ball, it just looks amazing, but they can't do it consistently. Give me a guy who can hit and maybe figure out some other things and become a major league player. And so Janis definitely has a great hit tool. He led his league, the Big Ten, in average, batting champion in that league. So really cool there. He probably is only a first baseman, so not a lot of positional flexibility. But, maybe if they can get a little more power out of his bat along with the hit tool, he could really become something offensively. The 16th round, EJ Exposito is a shortstop who might end up sliding over to second base eventually. But probably a decent bat. Again, I like this one because they're looking at guys who can hit a little bit. Good bat speed, and they draft him as a shortstop. There's a little less value if he has to slide over to second, but still, if you have a good hitting second baseman, that doesn't sound bad to me. 17 round, Kevin Kilpatrick, outfielder out of Central Florida Community College. He's actually a Georgia native. Braves didn't go as heavy with Georgia natives in this draft, but it's cool to see one here. He's known as a really high character guy. I do like this pick. He's got some projectability, some really good speed, a nice looking swing, may have the chance to get a little more power out of his bat over time. And so, another guy that if things fall right, go the right direction, could become actually a pretty good player. The next 2 guys maybe are going to be more difficult to sign, so I'm not going to spend as much time on them. But again, the Braves, if they do sign them, these are high school guys that probably would take some time to develop. But also, they're taking them here. That you take a flyer on them. If the guy does sign, then it really does improve. Upside guys in the lower minors for you. So Noah Williams out of California high school, and Christian Jackson, he's also from Georgia. Again, these guys may not sign, but both of them are very athletic, high upside guys. Jackson may be a little bit better of a hitter at this point, but we just see how it plays out if they're able to get them into the organization. And the last guy, around 20, Keyshawn Ogans, and don't think because he's the last draft pick that he's Mr. Irrelevant, as they call him in the NFL. He's a shortstop from the University of California, and is probably a guy who, at the very worst, is going to be a solid organizational guy. He's defensively is going to be a shortstop. He can stick there, which is that in and of itself has a lot of value. And, some solid talent. He's not maybe flashy in any one thing, but can do a lot of things well. So it's potential that if things break right for him, he could be, a backup infielder and make the bigs. So overall, my overall take for the Braves and their draft is positive. I like what they did. I like the upside. I always get a little more jazzed when the Braves take position players. I think position players are a little more fun to watch over time, and see what Michael Harris is doing right now. But that being said, we know the value of having a lot of talented pitching prospects. We know that you can go out and trade for some guys if you have all the pitching you need and you trade some of those prospects away. That could be something that could happen over time. But nonetheless, I like the fact that the Braves went with a little more upside in this draft. Yes, there's potentially more risk by doing that, but there's also a lot more reward. You have probably 4 or 5 pitchers in this draft that you could believe could become, really solid big league pitchers, middle of the rotation, or maybe even, a 1 or a 2. It's really hard to find an ace like we did with Max Fried, but, could another Kyle Wright be in this draft? Yeah, absolutely. You could totally see that happening, and you could see it happening with multiple guys in this draft. A lot of talent here. Yeah, some of them will probably never see the major leagues, but like I said, that happens with every draft. The weird thing about high school players, taking high school players, and this is why they're more volatile, is every high schooler, every 18-year-old is at a different stage of development. And, I actually coach basketball, so I see this all the time. You have guys who they look like studs as freshmen in high school, but they're actually done developing at that time. And then you have guys who will develop physically well beyond high school, and will get better and better and will overtake those guys. And also you have some guys who choose not to work hard, even though they're very talented, and they stall, and other guys who will work hard throughout and get better and better over time. So it's just really hard to project those guys. That's why once you get a 21-year-old college player, you can understand a little bit more physically of what this guy is, and who he's going to be, 2 or 3 years from now. So, the Braves took quite a few high school guys, and we'll just have to see, are they all kind of done, getting stronger? Are they done physically? I don't know, but hopefully, like I think we've got with Richie, you've got guys who are going to be hard workers. And what I have heard about this draft is the Braves took a lot of guys that they know are definitely high character guys. We know the Braves really do value that in their players. That's one thing that they want to know. They're not just going to look at the physical person, but they're going to look at the whole person, and they're going to draft the whole person, obviously. And it's those kinds of guys that tend to have a little more success over time. It's kind of like, particularly with high school guys, it's kind of like that, playing the lottery. When you take, a Mega Millions, lottery ticket, you have less chance of it cashing in for you. But when it does, when it hits, it's big bucks. And so we're hoping that some of these high school guys are going to be those lottery tickets that really cash in for us. Most of the early picks for the Braves, are very likely to take some time getting through the system. Like I mentioned, Owen Murphy might be a guy who could go a little quicker through the system, but of course that's just some experts thinking that could happen. But nonetheless, remember the Braves and their minor league system right now is really weak on the lower levels, and now it's not so much. You have a good draft. These guys, come in, new blood into the system, into the lower levels. You get, Augusta Green Jackets low A team that actually has some talent now, and that's encouraging, and that's kind of exciting. So that's what the Braves have. The Braves are in a position where they don't necessarily need quick help from the minors. It's always good when you have that, but they're not necessarily needing that right now. Let's replenish the minor league system, and in 2 or 3 years, let's see what we got. A couple of things that I really like out of this draft. I like our rounds 3 and 4 picks. Like I said, I get a little more jazzed up for the position players, and particularly guys with strong hit tools. And it looks like that Baldwin and McCabe are that. I'll love to see them progress hopefully through the system and get to the bigs somewhat soon and see what they can do with power and a good hit tool. So, this draft is not full of star power. The Braves didn't pick one of the real big name guys at the top of the draft. You wouldn't expect that with having the 20th pick. But I think what they did is they were really able to get a lot of value and spread out this draft in a way to get a lot of talent and guys that could end up being big time guys for them overall. I think it's more likely that you have a couple star pitchers come out of this draft than you have star position players. But again, a couple of these guys, a couple of these position players could surprise us. They definitely, pick some guys with maybe some upper end potential. My favorite picks for this draft, like I said, I really like Baldwin and McCabe. Not only are they coming in as really, potentially high quality hitters, but they're coming in at some positions of need. As far as the pitchers go, I really like J.R. Ritchie and Phillips with those. They were Braves' second and third picks of the draft. Not that I don't like Owen Murphy. I think he's a solid, first pick. But I think Ritchie and Phillips are potentially just as good as Murphy on the mound, and I could see any of those three guys becoming a top or middle of the rotation starter one day. So that would be certainly amazing if that were to happen. Well, that is the MLB draft review for the Braves. I'm really looking forward to the second half of the season getting going for the Braves and for them to overtake the Mets hopefully very soon, and see what the Braves also do in the during the trade deadline. They have some things to do. I think there are some interesting ways that Alex Anthopoulos could play the trade deadline, and obviously the next 2 weeks and what the Braves do on the field probably is going to impact some of his decision making. Well, all right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode of State of the Braves. Don't forget to like and follow me on Spotify. You can also find my videos on YouTube, and you can listen on Apple Podcasts as well. Please rate and review my stuff. It really helps a lot, and I really do appreciate you guys listening. I will talk to you soon.